Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, we have been focused this entire spring talking about what in the world is happening out there in the job market. And today is no different, but I have a slightly different angle that I'm going to take it by which. My special guest today wants you to treat your job search like buying a house. And let me just explain all of that here in just a second and why the corollaries between the two are so evident and might actually help you land your next job faster. My special guest today, his name is Shannon Taylor. He's a global talent acquisition leader with over 16 years experience in HR. His current role is as the director of talent acquisition at JCPenney, which puts him at the helm of the company's talent acquisition strategy, operations, and processes, which truly makes him a crucial contributor to the company's success. Now, his track record also includes working for industry leaders like Hard Rock International, Royal Caribbean Cruises, and Republic Services. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Shannon Taylor. Hey, Shannon.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. And look, we're going to talk right straight in. You talked to me a few weeks ago and you're like, Mary, there's so many corollaries between finding a job and buying a house that we have got to center the whole conversation around this. And I'm like, my little ears perked up and go, really interesting. Tell me more. Because I bought a house about a year and a half ago. Not a fun process. Ended up with an absolute gem of a place. But my goodness, the roller coaster of it all was a nightmare. And, lo and behold, I actually am in a job search right now. The roller coaster is wild. And there are some gems out there. But, it's a journey, isn't it? Right?
It completely is. And you said it best, right? It's a roller coaster. It's a journey. It's a search. When we think about the correlations, let's talk about just on the surface for a job seeker, right? You are looking to find the best house with the best view, with the best neighbors, with the best environment if you have kids or not, right? And we all do that in our job search, right? We're looking for the right company, the right role, the right neighborhood, the right people, the right neighborhood. And so the correlations are so there that people don't necessarily translate the two, and they should treat them very similar because the investment that you make in that next opportunity that you're going to take is just as big as the investment you're going to take in your next home.
It's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. And that decision, right? So you think about just a short-term decision. We go out and we buy homes and we say, we're going to spend X amount of dollars on our next place. The goal is to be there for a period of time, typically longer than 2 years, right? For some tax benefits and things like that. Ideally, we don't take roles that we want to go in and leave right away, right? You don't want to go in and say, "Ooh, I took the wrong job." 90 days later, I'm trying to find another house, another job again. Just like you don't want to buy a house and then 90 days later want to buy a new house.
Yeah, you want to get it right, you want to get it right for both sides as well. And there's so much that I want to dive into, but before we get there,
Sure.
I really want to get a finger on the pulse, in your role as a global talent acquisition leader. What do you think is going on in the current job market from your point of view? And why does it feel so different in 2024 Q1 than ever before? What's your take on it?
Yeah, so my biggest take is if we look at the job market today, there are signs that tell us it's healthy, right? So we've got an unemployment today that's under 4%. We have, wages are increasing month over month. So, people are making more money. But what you're seeing in the headlines are companies are downsizing. XYZ company just let go of X amount of number of people. Yeah. And so as a job seeker, what does that signal to you? You should signal that, hey, there's lots of jobs out there. There's things, and so why is it taking so long? And partly what this is hire rates are down. So although companies are paying people more money, they are also looking to do more with less. And so that's kind of what the dynamic that's happening in the market today is. If you're a job seeker in this market today, one of the things that I would say is you're going to find that right opportunity. It's just going to take longer. And it may look different than it did a year ago. And that may be the way of working, where the job is located. And honestly, what things you may have to give up to get that right opportunity. It's a different conversation these 12 months, and that's going to go forward.
Well, I mean, think about just the last 4 years. Almost feel like it's almost like the market is adjusting post pandemic. 2020, everything got gone to remote immediately without really any sort of planning on any sort of parts whatsoever. It was like, oh no, let's change quick. And then 2021, it seemed like recruiters were just desperate to get anybody with a pulse to take a job, and giving so many like sign-on bonuses and whatever. Boy, I wish it was 2021 right now. It's completely different. It feels like the time to fill for a position has gotten longer. And sometimes companies are just deciding after, extensive interviews to hold on placing the job. I mean, that's my response.
Yeah. It is. And you're right. It's the ebb and flow of the market, right? It's that true sense of supply and demand. That we experienced pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, during pandemic. And for companies, to your point, right, what we're seeing now is what I consider sort of the normalization of the market, of a job market, company behavior, is there were so many extremes, during the pandemic and post-pandemic, that we're now getting to what I would call normal business. And that is, we know that, for example, there was probably one candidate for every 20 jobs, right? Post pandemic. And that's just not normal as it relates to the ratio of candidate to roles, right?
Yeah.
And so companies were buying talent left and right? And maybe they needed them, maybe they didn't. And the environment that they were buying that talent in, they had the capital to do it, right? So there was a lot of underlying fiscal things that were happening, right? So we had a lot of the pandemic relief dollars. We had, companies leveraging tax incentives to make hires during the pandemic. There were rent moratoriums and mortgage moratoriums and all these other things that created an environment where cash was available and companies could then leverage that dollars to buy whatever talent they could, because the talent was either at home and they were making more money at home than at work, right? So they could stay at home and afford to do it. And so when they were going out and do that, they would say, okay, well, the talent is scarce, so I have to pay more, right? I've got to be better than my next competitor, and so that means $1 more here, 10,000 more there, 5, sign on bonus here, sign on bonus there. Come see me, right? And then what happens is the market starts to shift, right? So a lot of those underlying fiscal support items that were there before that created all of this sort of underlying cash in the market is now sort of slowly fade away. Those individuals that were at home and were making more money at home are now, those savings that they have over time are now starting to kind of go away. And they're saying, I need to get back to work. And so what happens is now that ratio that was, let's say, one candidate for every 20 jobs is now, 20 candidates for every one job.
That's right.
And so the pendulum starts to shift, right? Now the employer says, okay, well, I have options now. I don't have to make a decision today. I can wait a week. I can wait 2 weeks. Maybe if I wait a month, maybe I'll find that right person or the best person, whatever that may mean. And so it becomes this sort of supply and demand. And you can make a decision as much as options are concerned. And even when we think about and that's why I think it ties so well to the housing market, right? We think about in the height of the housing market, there were people lined up outside, and you would go to a house and they would tell you, what did they say? Before you leave the garage, submit your offer.
Yep.
Right. and for most of us who've been around for a while and have gone through sort of different markets, you go, that is absolutely crazy. You mean before I leave this house, I can't go see another one. I need to make an offer right now. And then you think about how it sort of shifted now. So you think about it now. Well, people are saying, hey, I want to look at this house, but I got options. I mean, I have a ton of options, but I have a little bit more time now to be a little more discerning. Maybe I can, be a little bit, negotiate a little bit stronger on that offer. Maybe I can get a little bit on the closing costs now that I wasn't able to get before, where I was having to offer over asking and all these other things. And that's truly what's happening here from a company and a candidate perspective around, bringing those two people together.
1,000%. And, I mean, having seen the housing market in a boom and in a bust myself, and have bought houses over, gosh, I don't even know now, 20 years. I totally love this as a correlation because let's break this down specifically. Talk to me about turnover. Turnover's low, right?
Mm-hmm.
Job supply, low, demand, high, lots of great talent
Mm-hmm.
out there in the world. So, using this house buyer analogy, where can job seekers go to find the hidden job market, right? As in the roles that are rarely publicized or have less competition. I think about like off market pocket listings in real
Mm-hmm.
estate. Tell us the secrets.
Oh man, it's the great thing and the bad thing about the job market is that there's always this underlying job market, right? And one of the things that you hear, and I know it's going to sound a bit cliche, but your network is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, you can go out and you can apply for 100 roles and you can get 100 no's. But the network that you reach out to and those individuals that you connect with and have meaningful connections is the secret sauce to finding that next opportunity.
Yeah.
And now here's the kicker around that is that network is about timing. Timing is everything too, right? So for example, if you meet someone at an event, you all have great connection. You have to have that meaningful sort of connection with individuals and not this, I need you to do something for me connection, because that other person really, they have a lot of other things going on. And so you've got to create these genuine relationships. And the job that you're looking for, the next job that you land may not be the job right now. It might be 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the road, because the timing is everything. We talk about different roles and you say, hey, this one job just popped up. Maybe that's not the right one. It may look good to you, but there's a lot of conversation or a lot of underlying things in the background that you may not know. Or on the other side of that is you have the right network with the right person. They understand your background and they realize that John Doe or Jane Doe in their organization is exiting. They haven't put the job out there yet, but hey, this is the point where I say, I know Mary. Mary's fantastic here. Let me just put Mary out there because I know John or Jane Doe's leaving.
Yeah.
Let's get her in front of the leader now. Listen, we might be able to land this for now and get this done. It never hits the market. And that is, to me, sort of the secret piece of it is, one, continuing to network and have really genuine connections with people. You got to have, in this market, you're going to have to be patient. Right? It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. And you don't let perfection get in the way of good, but make sure you are going into the right place for you, not just for today, but for the long term.
Yeah, let's break that down because I think people know that they're supposed to network. I should do that, but they don't really know how. And what I've learned over my career, and even more recently, I'm in a job search right now, is it takes a lot of courage. You just have to get over yourself, go to the networking events, go to the educational events that in your local industry. I mean, that's how you and I met at the beginning of this year. You were a speaker at a Dallas HR event. And I just have learned over the years that it takes courage to A, sit in the front of the room, B, ask a question that's smart and be a good listener, and C, go up and introduce yourself to whoever the speaker is or whoever's the organizers for the event. Because guess what? No one is going to know you're sitting in the audience if you don't do any of those things, right?
100%. And I'll even take it a step further, right? So we have networking events like you and I met. The internet is such a tool. You don't even have to leave your house.
Yep.
And I'll give you a perfect example in a really simple way. And it's actually something that happened to me this week is a woman reached out to me and said, hey, Shannon, I'm in a job search. I've been in my organization for several years. I'm really looking to get some insights on what the market is like, what's happening. And I just wanted to reach out to get to know you. Would you be open to setting up some time?
Yeah.
And honestly, and here's the thing is, my grandmother would always say is if you don't ask, you don't get. And it's a really simple way to say, be courageous, be courageous, ask the question and don't answer it yourself. Right? She could have just said, no, he's never going to reach back out to me, blah, 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 blah. But ultimately I reached back out to her. I was like, absolutely. And we set up some time. We talked about it. I gave her some insights around, challenges that job seekers are going to face coming out of an organization where you've been there, 20, 30 years, and what the job market is today if you haven't looked for an opportunity in very long. And I told her, let me know, and I'll try to help as much as I can and share with my network her background. And that's where it starts, right? It's a very simple outreach on a LinkedIn. Now you have to be sort of intentional about your outreach and, make sure that you're maximizing that in connection and time. But that's a very simple way that someone can go out and connect with someone and know that no is okay. Because at the end of the day, you can only gain, you can't lose anything in that moment.
Yeah, that's so smart. And I'm glad that you shared that, because I think sometimes people get the feeling it's that negative Nancy voice that goes, I don't want to come off as pushy. I don't want to be seen as a stalker. Like, oh, he's so busy. Like it's all of that voice that keeps you from doing the thing. Right. And, one of the things that I have been doing as part of my job search, I mean, it's sad to say, but I was part of a pretty massive layoff at my last company. Some very brilliant people that were part of this layoff. It's a numbers game, right? As I'm making connections with recruiters, I always make sure to ask, like, what other roles are you looking to fill right now? Because I know some incredible people. I'm more than happy to connect you with so-and-so who, is a senior executive or a director or, somebody who's really good at this. And, I think that that's the bottom line. That's what everybody talks about in general terms of like, make it a two-way win-win situation, but actually do it, and introduce the peoples and help other people win the right roles as well. Right.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, right, I think at its basic core, we're all people.
Yeah.
Right. We have titles, we have jobs. Those are things. But at the end of the day, it's the human connection that we have to do that helps us get to that next opportunity, next thing, next place. And so don't get discouraged by someone's title. Don't get discouraged by any of the things that, I would say have been historical in the way in which we've communicated, whether you've been in an organization that is hierarchical and you don't talk to the manager and you don't talk to the director until you talk to your manager and you don't talk to the VP. Oh, you never talk to the CEO, right? Forget all of that.
Yeah, it's all dumb.
It's all crazy. Yeah, it's just not. At the end of the day, we are all people, and we all go to sleep and wake up in the morning. And if you take that approach to say, I'm going to reach out to this person who I believe I can be a benefit to, and they can be a benefit to me, and create a genuine connection. They may not all want to connect, right? And you have to be okay with that. But know that you're probably going to get the ones that say yes are going to be more meaningful connections, and the ones that you want versus the ones that said no, because at least you know where you stand.
Yeah. And ultimately, you know the kind of culture of the organization by potentially how people respond back to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that tells you a lot. And, again, it comes back to, I know it's cliche, but I'm going to say it out loud. You're interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. And ultimately, people in talent acquisition, they're people. They should be people who love to interact with other people. If they're not, then there's something really wrong, right? So that gives you a little bit of a red flag of going, maybe there's another company out there that's a better fit for me to apply for.
And that is it, right? One of the things that I talk about, I know, from a job seeker perspective, it gives you a little insight on the other side, which is one of the things that I talk about with teams that I've led in the past is, from a TA perspective, we are M&A people.
Yeah.
Right. Our role, if we took talent off the front and put an M in front, it's mergers and acquisitions. Right. So we are talent acquisition. The difference is my team, we buy people every day. That's what we do. At the core of what we do is we are acquiring people every day. And it's the same thing that organizations do with businesses, like through an M&A. And what are those processes? Are the same thing. And even with buying homes, it's the same thing. Is you do your due diligence. You're going to do your reference checks, right? You're going to do your backgrounds, and you're going to make sure that when you make that acquisition of that human, that it's a really good bet that you're going to get the value that you want out of that person. And on the candidate side, it's important that you take that same approach. Do your research, talk to people, get a sense of folks that may have been there and are no longer there. What was their exit like? and then decide whether or not this acquisition that you're going to make with an organization is one that's going to be valuable to you as well. Because guaranteed, organizations are going to want to get 110% out of you. And you want to make sure that if they're going to get 110% out of you, that there's a benefit for you as well in that 110%, whether that's, the right compensation, the right development, the right work-life, integration, the right MTO policies, and all these other things that make this marriage that you're about to do, and, both personally and financially beneficial on both sides. And when that happens, that's where the magic is there, right? You have long-term associates who do really great work for the organization. They feel fulfilled, and ultimately it leans into great family life and all of those other things that kind of come together. And at some point, you'll find it. But I think it's about asking the right questions, making the right connections. And also, go back to our housing piece, is make sure you look at several different neighborhoods, right? Because there's, when I think about the most sought after communities, they don't always have homes for sale.
Yeah.
Right. But there are adjacent communities that are just as great that you may be blind to because you've got this single focus on. And so make sure you look at your options, consider all the possibilities, and do not let perfection get in the way of good as you think about your career search.
That's so good. And, while you were talking about that, it made me think about Glassdoor is an excellent resource for job seekers. If you have not gone on to Glassdoor, again, all the links and everything we talk about in today's episode is over on the show notes at thesimplifiers.com. But that's where you can see real life people who have been, either employees inside a company and talked about what the actual employee experience was, or maybe candidates who have interviewed at a prospective company and what the interview process was like. That's how you get the real deal information. Now, keep in mind, people who put information on Glassdoor are either really happy or really angry. Just FYI, I don't think people in the middle typically put their feedback on there. But nonetheless, it gives you a little bit of a finger on the pulse of what's going on there, right?
Oh, it gives you some perspective, right? I always say is, Glassdoor is a great way to get some insight, right? You take it for, what it's worth. I think there's some great information there that can help you as you look to determine whether or not an organization culturally aligns with what you're looking for, does it right by its employees like you would expect. It has a great set of benefits and all those other things. Definitely a great place to start, do your research. And I visit it all the time. And it's important to my team to understand what people are saying about us and how we can always continue to improve.
And I think the other way of getting sort of that insider information, finding those pocket listings of jobs that are not on the market is, start to do a search inside your LinkedIn. So let's say, for example, I don't know, you want to become an instructional designer, and you want to be an instructional designer, I don't know, at Nike. So you go into LinkedIn, you search Nike, you search the job title. There it is. There's all the instructional designers that literally work at Nike right now. You can go in and target those folks, connect with them, build relationships, and eventually, make a connection request. And then the next step after that is, hey, Shannon, I really want to work at Nike one day. I would love to spend 15 minutes or 30 if you've got it. Let's just grab a virtual coffee and tell me more about the culture at Nike and what skills I need most in order to work there. Not everyone's going to say yes, but if you've developed a relationship by commenting and liking their posts and they keep seeing this name Mary pop up everywhere, like eventually they're going to be like, I want to talk to this girl. What is going on with her? Why is she everywhere? And they will build that relationship. And guess what? 3 months, 2 months, next week down the road, when an instructional designer role opens up at Nike, you already have an in. Joe is going to go and make an internal referral for you if you ask with courage. And correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon, with an internal referral, your application goes to the top of the pile for the recruiters, right?
Oh, man. I mean, you can sometimes circumvent the entire process, right? Yeah. And depending on the organization and how they set those things up, but referrals are ideal for lots of organizations for a lot of different reasons. And you're exactly right, Mary. I mean, the idea of planting those seeds along the way, right? I used to work for a leader and he would say all the time, Shannon, you got to plant a seed to grow a tree.
Yeah.
And so plant those seeds along the way and you'll grow a tree and you'll be surprised where that tree shows up. But you got to plant a lot of seeds and then nurture and water and that sort of thing. And ultimately, like you mentioned around having that conversation with someone at Nike that's in the department, you also get a sense of the best way to sort of go after those roles. So you may be interested in a role, and you may find out that at an organization, those roles are typically internal. So is it realistic for you to go after that role, or do you have to take a different approach to get there? And so understanding those sort of unsaid sort of processes that are internally known, that are not externally known, can also guide you down the right path to success in the next career opportunity.
Yeah, and that also makes me think about the fact that in Nike, they might call an instructional designer something different. The job title is just something else, like training manager or VP of training. And, like JP Morgan, they do that. Everybody's a VP, right? So it's like you search at jobs and you might not be looking for the right keywords, when you're searching for the actual job titles as well. So,
oh, yeah.
I kind of want to switch gears a little and talk again about the housing market as an analogy. So let's say job seekers are ready to make their offer. And when I say offer in this mind is putting my formal application together. Mm-hmm. How can they make it the most compelling when they are applying for roles so that they actually land the interview? What are some tips there?
Oh, fantastic. So get your pens. Here we go. All righty. So when we think about it's time to put in that offer, one, the language that is used in a job description clearly lays out the language that is used internally about a role. And so when you think about your resume, before applying before submitting that resume, ensure that you are using the language and describing your experience in a way that aligns to the role that you're applying for. Right? Because recruiters, particularly if they're using an applicant tracking system, they are leveraging some sort of technology to maybe screen it, or they're looking for keywords and other things. And if your resume doesn't speak to that, it's not naturally going to go to the top. And any time for recruiters where you create in a moment where they have to interpret your background to see a fit, you fall further and further down the line. So that's number one. Let's make sure that the language aligns and that you're speaking to the role and describing your experience as it speaks to that role. So one of the things that I tell people all the time is you should have version 1 through 100 of your resume. Your resume is a living, breathing document that you need to mold and massage to make sure that it speaks to the experience that you have as it aligns with the role that you're applying for. So I think that's number one. Number two is, make sure your resume is as long as it needs to be, right? And what I mean by that, if somebody has a 5-year career, you don't need a 5-page resume. Now, you may need a 1-pager, which will hopefully 1-pager will get that done. But if you've got a 30-year career and you've got 2 pages, that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that so as you kind of do that, those are kind of the things around the resume. And then take a step back before you submit it. And what you want to do is look at it and say, does this tell the story that I want somebody to know if they were going to read it in 30 seconds? Right. And if it does, submit it. If it doesn't, take a look at it and say, am I spilling it all on the table? And it's just too much too soon. Right. Mm-hmm. So I always kind of compare it to, imagine if you met someone for the first time in person, and in that first interaction, you told me everything about you.
You would be exhausted. Be like, Mary, I gotta go.
Yeah, it'd be like, okay, that's great. I gotta go. Right? Like and that's what a lot of people tend to do is they get those resumes and they want to tell me everything about them. And listen, I think it's great, and I respect their backgrounds and all of the work because it's a lot of effort and time and careers that happen through there. But I don't need to know everything all the time right now. There's going to be a moment where that matters. And in the initial interaction, it doesn't necessarily matter as much.
Yeah.
And so, just kind of keep that in mind. And then secondarily, get that thing submitted, get it in there. If you want to do, I know the big question is always cover letters or no cover letter, right? I think most recruiters, I would say probably the cover letter is not the first place they go. Your resume is. I think cover letters are useful if there's a story to tell. For example, if you are relocating from one place to the next or something in that nature to fill in any gaps around that. But I think the right resume in your application should do well. And then from there, it's finding those right people and following up, right? And not following up in the stalker way, right? It's like every week, like, did you get my resume? Did you get my resume? But it's, to your point, doing your research, having those names and reaching out to maybe someone you connected with and saying, hey, I submitted my resume. If you could put in a great word for me, or if you could pass it along to the right person, I sure would appreciate it. And I think those kind of things will help go a long way.
Yeah. Last week we had on the podcast recruiter Kelly Simons, and she was saying from her point of view, a recruiter, especially somebody who deals with high volume recs and hires, spends 3 to 6 seconds on a resume. And 3 to 6 seconds. So that kind of made me step back and go, hang on, no one can read anything in 6 seconds, but they can scan really quickly. Which reminds me of just the idea of making sure that there is white space in your resume and that what you're trying to get across very, very quickly is seen very quickly. If literally it's only 6 seconds, I think 30 seconds, man, what a lifetime. You can read some stuff, but 6 seconds, that's fast.
It's fast. And even so much, particularly in high volume, right? I always say I like to use visuals because it helps people sort of relate to what I'm saying. Think of this as the resume that you have is your magazine cover.
Yeah.
Right. And your magazine cover, you're in New York City. We're going to do Manhattan. We're in New York City. We're walking down the street in New York City, and you go to one of those, big magazine news booths, right? And they've got all these magazine covers. They've got all these magazines, newspapers, and all that kind of good jazz. And you got to step back and say, does my magazine cover, is it compelling enough, interesting enough, exciting enough that out of all of these magazine covers, the person walking by is going to stop and pick it up and look at mine? And then, is it compelling enough, exciting enough, and interesting enough for them to go to page 2?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you can get them to go to page 2 is, I want to learn more from a recruiter perspective. Let me reach out and get that, get us time set up for us to chat and do a 15, 30-minute screen. And that's where you can then start to add a voice and some context to your magazine cover.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the idea of using your resume and your cover letter to entice and intrigue people of like,
Yes.
Hang on, she did what? Like, hang on, tell me more about that big accomplishment. Because I think that's it's a piece. It's a little bit of a breadcrumb every step of the way to help them go, oh, actually, you know what? This is a great candidate for us. And even if this role isn't perfect, we're going to figure out a way to place her in the right role in our organization and truly have a recruiter advocate for you too, right? That's the magic of it all.
The magic is, but that goes into that interpersonal connection, right?
Yeah.
So you could have a great background and have a crappy connection, and recruiters it's just not, it's not innate, right? So, and I also think about depending on the recruiter. So the roles of recruiters, depending on where the part they play in this. So give you an example. As a corporate recruiter, the way I describe corporate recruiters is we don't find jobs for people. That's not the corporate recruiter's job. Right. The organization, we have a corporate recruiting team to find people for jobs. Right. And so now on the flip side of that, if you're in the agency side, if you're working with an executive recruiter, right, they're in their business to do the exact opposite. Right. They're there to market you, to find that right job for you. And so you always have to play that kind of fine line with an internal recruiter because one, depending on the role, right? So we're talking about a high volume role, and where there's lots of the same position, there's a lot of that reach back. There's a lot of that reach back because they're talent pooling, their pipelining, that sort of thing. If you're talking about exec search roles, or if you're in an executive side or corporate roles, there may not be a high volume, right? So I've got parts of our business where we may hire an attorney every 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. And so we may not have that deep pipeline. We may not be connecting with you as often because we know we fill this role. It may be another 5 years before we have another legal opportunity. Now, on the flip side of that, we may connect. If you're in accounting, you're an entry-level accountant, we may have more of those. It's more often than, than some of the senior level positions. And so it's always about, one, you've got to stay connected with that recruiter, but understand that they're in the business to find the right people for the roles that they have, not to find roles for the people that they know.
That's an excellent point. And thinking about the role of magic in itself, right? I mean, there is a bit of serendipity in job seeking as in buying a house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can a job seeker increase their chances of kind of getting the stars to align in their job search? I think I know the answer. You're about to say relationships, aren't you?
It is. But one of the things that I would say too is, when you go through this job search, you have to be, what I always say is, open to the possibility. Mm. You got to be open to the possibility, and when you think about careers aren't linear. They go up, they go down, they go back, they go forward, and you may get individuals that will say, "I was a manager. I'm not taking a senior analyst role. Mm. Never doing that again." And so what happens is you may miss out on an opportunity because you were playing checkers with your career. You're playing one step ahead, right? Instead of playing a game of chess with your career and playing for the long game. So, that senior analyst role may be your way into the door to that next opportunity that gets you to the manager role, the director role, the VP role. And sometimes in a company's senior analyst role for them is a manager, right? At your company, it was a manager. At their company, it's a senior. And you talk about scope and size and responsibility, and compensation may be completely different and better in some cases. But you looked at it on the surface. And so be very strategic around the opportunities, be open to the possibilities. And then I always say that there's two jobs that you have when you go through your job search, particularly once you get that interview. The first job you have is to put your best foot forward, interview really, really well, be authentic to who you are, and land the job.
Yes.
That's your first job in this job seeking. The second part of that is tend to determine, right, is it the right job for you? Right? So you want to be able to say, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to get everything we got. And then on the second side of that is, at the end of that, they may love you. They may decide to offer it to you. And then it's your job. The second part of your job is to say, is this the right thing for me? Mm. Right? And if it is, kumbaya. If it isn't, make that difficult decision, because when you get it wrong, it's really wrong. And so just be aware of that.
And I think that's interesting to flip it, because I think a lot of people will do that first when they read the job description and go, oh, I don't know. Do I have all this, the background that they're asking for, and maybe a little bit trepidatious to apply for a role, and then just cut it off right then and there. But really, you got to just go for it. And then you can discern second. I mean, I love that. It's a paradigm shift right there.
It is. And again, it's because what I always say is, don't let perfection get in the way of good.
Yeah.
Don't ever do it. And in this market, again, I think with the limited opportunities, you've got to be open to the possibility and always looking to say, is this the right role? Right? Is this the right company? And one of the things that I talked about within our Dallas HR event where we met, which was the three things, right? Which is compensation is important, flexibility is important, but benefits are great. But if they don't have the right culture, it's not the right place for you.
Yeah.
And so make sure you are weighing those things out as a job seeker, and really, really making sure you're in the right place for you. And I know it's hard to do in the moment, and people are listening are going to say, yeah, that sounds great, Shannon. You're in a job today. I'm out here looking, and, I have a lifestyle to maintain, and I completely understand that. But what I will tell you is, do the best as you can to vet out these opportunities. Put your best foot forward, be clear and to the point, develop those relationships. And I will tell you, you will land that right opportunity that will not just be for today, but for the long term.
I love it. And also, I think that that shifts the energy behind what you're bringing forth in your interview process and in your application process, shifts it away from kind of desperation and back into an empowering place where it's like, actually, I'm going to discern, is this the right offer for me? Because then, I don't know. I think that that changes the dynamic of the conversation between you and the hiring manager. By no means am I saying going in cocky and like,
Right.
tell me how this is good for me. Like, I'm not saying that, but it changes the energy. It changes your body language. It changes how everything that is part of that conversation and process from the first recruiter call to the final hiring manager call. Right?
Is you now have choice in the matter and you believe it.
Yes.
Right. And that's what it's all about. It's you have choice in the matter, right? You're not just a victim of the circumstance. You have a choice. Make sure you exercise that choice because whatever choice you make, you've got to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so and again, organizations are vetting just as much, are vetting just as much as you should, if not more. And so make sure that you make the right choice for you.
You guys, if you are curious about Shannon and the work that he does out in the world, make sure to connect with him on LinkedIn through our show notes over at thesimplifiers.com. That'll have his LinkedIn link for you there to learn more about, well, all the great roles that are available over at JCPenney as well. So Shannon, as we wrap up, I got a couple of questions I like to ask everyone. And again, thank you so much. I really, really love this analogy, and I hope people will take on it and chew on it all week long and thinking about, you know what, it's like buying a house. I can do this. This isn't that scary or hard. So my first question for you is this. Tell me, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
There's a book out there. It's called Reset. It's been out for a little bit now. It's by Johnny C. Taylor Jr. And it's a leader's guide to work in an age of upheaval. And it's been a really good book just for me to read as we talk about just the workplace leadership, challenges along the way, things that I've learned. And it's got real life examples. I would recommend it to anybody.
Awesome. We'll link it up in the show notes for everybody if you guys want to check it out there. So tell us, Shannon, who is one person in your network, somebody that you know personally that you just feel is up to brilliant things? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
Oh, man. So it's an organization and a company that I've worked with for several years now. The CEO, his name is Neil Costa. And it's a company called HireClicks, and they are a recruitment marketing organization. And they are just doing some great things in this market from a TA perspective. When you're trying to attract talent in a different way, they're just doing some really brilliant things to make it happen. And so, Neil and his team over at HireClicks are great people to work with, and we've been doing some great things over the years. So I really appreciate that.
Awesome. We'll link him and the company up in the show notes for you guys as well to check out. I believe that gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Oof. How much time do we have? I will tell you, I am grateful for being able to be on the green side of the grass, because when you're on the green side of the grass and you get to wake up in the morning, you have the opportunity to try it again. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm grateful for.
I love it. So my final question for you today is this. And again, thank you so much for being with us. Someone somewhere out there is listening to you and I right now, and they are on the struggle bus. They have been looking for a job for months and months and months and months, and they're feeling like they're really at their wits' end. Maybe they've tried to buy a house recently and that didn't work out either. What's one thing that you could whisper into their ear right now just to encourage them in this moment?
One thing that I would say to them is, don't give up. Don't despair. The right opportunity is just around the corner. You just got to keep moving forward. And as my mother would say, you got to be a Chevrolet. Shove one foot in front of the other and lay it. Just shove it and lay it. Just keep going, because there is light at the end of the tunnel. Don't give up.
Shove it and lay it. I love that. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.